Welcome to this tutorial and review of mylingua, which is an amazing resource for improving your Chinese through reading real news articles in Chinese and also listening to them. So I won't go through the onboarding sequence, but it's a very simple and easy to follow sequence. You'll be asked what topics you're interested in, and also crucially what your estimation of your current Chinese level is. And once you've done that, mylingua will with its algorithm will troll maybe 15,000 or so articles it mentions from the recent days in Chinese to find ones that are appropriate for your level. Now I'll show you a bit more about that shortly. I'll just log in to show you now. So once you've completed the onboarding sequence and mentioned your level approximately and mentioned which topics you're interested in, mylingua provides you with a newsfeed. And this is a great feature in and of itself, but there's lots of little things about it which make it even better. So the first thing worth mentioning is this here, the mylingua score. And as you can see here, it says it expresses the readability of the article given your vocabulary. It considers your known words, characters, and the frequency of unknown words. So basically what it's saying is it's telling you how appropriate that article is for your level, according to mylingua. And according to mylingua, what it's after really is a mylingua score of maybe 80 to 90%, as you can see here. And the logic behind that is that if you already understand the vast majority of the words in an article, then learning the remaining words in an article you don't know will be that much more easier and enjoyable because of the context of what you already know from the article. Now, as a concept, that's fine, it's very effective, and it's true it does make it more, or can make it more interesting and enjoyable, more motivating, because you feel like you're able to tackle that content very easily. But having said that, don't be afraid of using articles where you don't know as much of the words already. That's still a very effective way to learn, and especially with mylingua, because mylingua's features are so good that you wouldn't actually need to have a very high mylingua score for it to be enjoyable, working through an article where you don't know much of the words yet, or certainly less than 80%, even say 50%, 60%, you'd still find it enjoyable and very helpful because the features of mylingua are so powerful. Now, you can see here it mentions the topics of the article, and you can toggle these up here, such as if you click on finance, for example, it will then refresh and suggest articles centered on business and finance and so on. Now, on a related note to the mylingua score, this is partly a calculation of these figures here. So it tells you 409 words in this article, 87 of them will be new words, i.e. words I don't yet know yet, based on my time using mylingua. Now, obviously that's useful for building the mylingua score, which is a great way for you to see whether you'd like to read an article at a given time based on how easy, in inverted commas, you want to find it or not on that given time, that given day. But also, just in and of itself, this is a really handy little feature for when if you're in a bit of a rush on a given day and you think you haven't got much time, or you've really got almost no time, then for example, there's an article here, 125 words, and that would be perfect if you're wanting to maintain your habit of learning Chinese each day. But on a given day you're just so busy, you've not got much time, then that's a great way to quickly see what could you fit in on that day. And you'll also notice that scrolling through here, there's a lot of short articles, but for other topics, this might just be because I've clicked on business there, but with other topics it will suggest quite a wide range of word counts for you. Sometimes 500, even as many as 1,000 at times. So you'll be able to get a wide range of word counts to suit how busy you are on a given day. And just quickly again on that, one of the biggest challenges with learning Chinese especially, or any language which has a lot of differences from your first language, in this case English for me, is because of the huge amount of differences, and thinking in particular of characters here, Chinese characters, to work through a certain amount of Chinese content can take longer than it would, to work through the same amount of content in, say, Italian or Spanish, languages with less differences from English, but share an alphabet with English, for example. And so, therefore, one of the biggest challenges when learning Chinese can be having enough time. For example, I've had, long time periods since I started learning Chinese where I haven't been learning Chinese because I felt like I'd almost be wasting my time, because if I only had a certain amount of time, free to actively learn Chinese each day, but didn't feel this was enough to genuinely make progress, then I'd decide, just not to learn any Chinese during that time period at all, because I could use that time in another way, in a more effective way, on something else. So in other words, previously it would feel like I'd need a sort of minimum amount of time to improve my Chinese each day, and if I can't find enough of that time each day, then I'll just leave it for now and I'll come back to learning Chinese another time. But with mylingua, because of this feature where you can each day choose content based on how much time you have, according to the word count, you can keep the habit going. And the fact that, and we'll get into this shortly, the fact that mylingua keeps track of the words you're learning, the words you've learned, the words you still don't know, no matter how much or how little Chinese you learn each day with mylingua, it's still building up mylingua's understanding of your Chinese level, and therefore your own Chinese level, because it keeps track of the words you've learned and are learning. So it's an amazing way for enabling you to keep learning Chinese despite how busy life can get. So that's, personally, that's one of the most valuable things I've found about mylingua, aside from all the other great features, which we'll get into now. So just quickly, you can see here, it's all recent content because the date here, 20th of November. You can like an article so that, you can tell mylingua's algorithm that's sort of content you particularly like, and it can therefore suggest even more appropriate and specific content like that in the future. Obviously, I'm no scientist, no expert on AI, but from what I understand, with AI, the more information you give it, the smarter it gets, in inverted commas. So yeah, if you can give mylingua's algorithm more information like that, it will only get better for you in terms of usability and how much you enjoy it and stuff. But that being said, it's great, immediately when you're using it, so don't worry too much about that. Now you can also bookmark articles, and you'll then see it in your My History part here. So we'll now get into looking at how it works inside an article. So yeah, as an example, let's go on this one. And you'll see immediately, you've still got these stats at the top, and you can also bookmark it. And then on the right here, you've got how it works. And the fundamental feature of mylingua, I guess, is this word status feature, and it's an amazing feature. So basically, mylingua divides the words in an article into words you know, for words you're learning, and words you don't yet know. So just glancing at this article, all the words in this ink colour are words you already know. So when you onboard with mylingua, when you get started, it will give a rough estimate of this based on the Chinese level you select when you're onboarding with mylingua. But obviously, the more you use mylingua, the more realistic, the more attuned to your level it will become. So yeah, as you can see, these are all known words. The words in red here, like this one, that's a word it says I don't yet know.
悠久
And you'll see when I click on it, so when I hover over it, it gives you the pinyin and the quick translation, but then also when you actually click on it, it appears here, you'll hear it pronounced by first language speaker audio, which is very helpful. Now, aside from the translation, you have these options. You can click known, learning, and obviously, as you can see, its current status is that it's unknown. Now, for this one, I've not come across that before, but I can see here from the fact it was in the old HSK5, it's probably a fairly useful word to know, and it's already got characters I recognise in there that are forming the word. So even though mylingua suggests to learn other words first based on its frequency calculation, I think I might want to learn this word anyway. So I'll click learning, and as you can see, it now turns blue. And what's great about this feature, it doesn't just turn blue in this article, of course. In any article you read on mylingua, this word will now appear as blue. And if, say, for example, after a few days or a few weeks, you've started to notice the word more in other articles and you feel familiar with its meaning, you can then, when you next come across it at that point, you can click on it again and click known. And then it turns to, an ink colour, because it's now a known word according to your input to mylingua. Now, unlikely you'll need to do this much, but just for example, say you came across a word which mylingua had you down as knowing based on your onboarding sequence, but actually you feel you don't know it yet, you can obviously click unknown here. So it's very flexible. And going back to this frequency feature from mylingua, let's click on a more common word, a common character. So as you can see here, very common character, frequency rank of 46. So this is a very helpful feature from mylingua. It can help you to prioritise which words to click as learning and which words to not bother starting to learn yet, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with loads of words you're learning, perhaps, personal preference, but you may not want to. And indeed, I think mylingua recommends somewhere between a proportion of learning words between, I think, 10 and 18% off the top of my head, something like that. And we'll get into that shortly. But the frequency rank is a helpful way to determine that. Just personally, I like to still click learning if it's a word I want to learn, regardless of its frequency and regardless of how much that proportion of learning words climbs, just because I'm eager to learn them, and I don't mind if there's a lot of blue on the screen at times. But just use that how you see fit. And in terms of other features, if you click on a character, it will also highlight the whole sentence, as you see here, and then if you want to, you can click up here to translate that sentence. Now, because the features of mylingua are so good, you can read through each sentence and highlight each word to see what it means and the opinion. So you could very quickly get some sort of understanding of what each character, each word in a sentence means, and therefore build your own sense of what the sentence might mean. But this is a very helpful feature to have if you want to just check and see if you're along the right lines. And of course, as a final thing on that, it is worth mentioning that translation is more of an art than a science, so don't feel too rigid about translations like this. In fact, they're useful, but there's other ways of interpreting sentences, so don't worry too much. Now, mylingua recommend going about reading and listening to the articles in a certain way. So first, they recommend listening to the article. Now, and that's without reading it at all, just listening. So to do that, you press play up here, and then it will play the whole article to you for you to listen to. And that's a paid feature, by the way. Now, I won't do that now because, take a while to listen to the whole article, but once you've listened to it, mylingua then recommend reading the article but without translating. So you could turn off, these features that show you the meaning of the words and just try to read it and see how you get on. You can then read it again, but with the features to see what words you don't know mean. And then as you're doing that, marking the words, for learning or unknown or known. And then once you've done that, they recommend listening to it again whilst reading it. And, this is a step I'd add if you're wanting to be really thorough. You could then even, listen to it again without reading, so that you can compare the first step of the process with the last step to see how much more you're understanding. And obviously it depends on the length of the article, but that process, even with quite a few steps, won't actually take that long, because mylingua's features are so easy to use and convenient. Now, just as a final thing, a benefit of comparing that first step with maybe listening to it again at the end, just listening to it, that should be a very nice experience, because you'll have improved a lot, and it'll help continue to build your motivation. So that's how mylingua recommend using it. That being said, on the free trial with non-paid features, you can still read, I think, 5 articles a week and do 2 text imports. Now that's a very generous free offer, because mylingua's features, free features are very good as well. And although listening is an essential part of learning any language and is very helpful to complement your reading to improve both at the same time, if, for example, at a given time you're just wanting to use the free version, it's still an amazing resource. But, of course, I would recommend the paid version if you're able to. Now, we'll look at a few more features of mylingua, such as, so we've got here the Newsfeed. We'll go back there. So you've got the Newsfeed. You have a progress tab here where you can see, keep track of all the words you've been learning, and, how much of a percentage you've got left to learn all the words in HSK 5, for example, or HSK 2 or HSK 6, depending on, your level at a given time. And it's a feature I think mylingua plan to keep developing, keep improving in the future, but it's already very good. And it's just a nice little way to keep track of your progress, and also it shows you your streaks, I guess people call it, how many consecutive days you've been studying, which can also be a nice way for motivation for some people, to continue that process. One of my favourite features of mylingua is the text import feature. So I'll click on that now. Now, I've imported quite a few things there, long articles from various sources, including real-time Mandarin. As you can see, you can mark articles as finished and they appear green. Now, as an example, let's go to a few more. Real-time Mandarin, you can see there was an article here. This is from a Chinese news site, and I imported this, and at the time I think my mylingua score was something like 60% for it, or 70%. There was quite a lot of words I didn't yet know, because it had, a lot of niche vocabulary. So it's an article where, as you can see, nearly 4,000 words long, really long article, where they interview a Chinese person working in Tanzania, an engineer who's also got experience in working in Africa in general. And it was just a fascinating interview about, infrastructure projects China's helping to build in Africa, and the logistics of it, how it's going, that sort of thing. But there was obviously a lot of niche vocabulary about construction and stuff as well. And to read an article like this without mylingua, and if I knew, say, 70%, at best 70% of the words already, that would take me ages, to go through it, say looking up words in Pleco, or even using, Google Chrome extensions, where you can, a bit like mylingua's feature, hover over it and it tells you the pinyin, a definition. Even doing stuff like that, it would have been a much less enjoyable process, and crucially it would have taken so much longer, to the point it wouldn't have been worth doing, really. So what the text import feature of mylingua enables you to do is tackle content in Chinese you would have otherwise had to wait for until you could understand the vast majority of it. With mylingua, despite they're right to highlight their concept of the mylingua score being high, so that you can use read articles you already understand a lot of, but I actually find as well, another of the standout features of mylingua is that it actually makes reading articles where your mylingua score is quite a bit lower than that a really enjoyable process. So it enables you to get to grips with Chinese content, due to just time constraints. You wouldn't have been able to get to grips with just, going about it yourself without mylingua's features. So yeah, it's an amazing resource, and yeah, personally that text input feature is my favourite part of it actually. But yeah, as you've seen, the Newsfeed is also very powerful. It's got something for everyone, and I definitely recommend using it. Now, to summarise, if you're not sure whether to use it or not, you're worried that, maybe it's for intermediate to advanced learners. I've spoken to the founders of mylingua before, and one of them used mylingua from beginning Chinese to improve their Chinese level. So you can use mylingua regardless of your level. It's, as you've seen, it's a very flexible, very convenient and very enjoyable resource. Now, having spoken to the founders, I think there are plans hopefully in the future where they will use mylingua's features, where you can use it for improving your level in other languages as well, which would be fantastic. But for now, it's for learning Chinese, improving your Chinese, and I definitely recommend it. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to email me at contact@howtolearnlanguages.info, and I'll get back to you promptly. I'd be more than happy to help.